She was like, so do you want to go to church with me tomorrow? And I was like, no. I think we had this discussion before, right? And, she was like, that's right. You don't want to go to church. Okay, no problem. And then the very next week, she's like, so Rebekah, do you want to go to church with me tomorrow? It was like clockwork. She would not let up. So my name's Rebekah. I grew up in Scarborough. My childhood religion, I didn't have one. So when I was like 4 and 5 years old, my grandparents used to take me to church, and then they could no longer take me because of some family issues, some family arguments. And then I wasn't going to church anymore. My parents, by the time I was born, had stopped going to church. So they were previously very involved in it. So there was no talk of religion or anything like that in my household growing up. And even though I loved church when I was like in kindergarten, being the only one in the family who wanted to go back at such a young age, I couldn't keep that up. I basically just forgot God existed over time. My childhood was really tough. My mom became sick when I was like 6 years old. She was bedridden until the day she passed away when I was 15. And my dad was, being the only one supporting the family with 3 kids and having gone through abuse in his childhood. He was, back then, he's awesome now. He and I are like best friends, but back then he was a very, very angry person. And it was a very angry household to grow up in, and a very sad household. My dad was always either working or angry, and my mom was bedridden. Though there are some good things about that, because her and I were really, really close because of that, because she was just always there. So we spent all of our time together. I've gone through my own abuse as a child as well. And on top of that, was bullied at school, and we didn't make a lot of money. We were really struggling for food a lot of days. So it was a rough childhood. By the time I was 14, I was like severely depressed and attempted suicide, which, I didn't succeed, praise God. But things only went downhill from there. And then my dealer introduced me to cocaine. And then my roommate introduced me to alcohol. And then I started abusing my prescription meds, because there was a point where I was off work because of depression, and they had given me like tranquilizers for anxiety, which just like knocked me right out, So I started abusing those. Later on in life, I got my hands on like Xanax, and that was just like straight blackout. It wasn't even enjoyable. I just did it so that I wouldn't be like awake. I did meet some other addicts online, so I would meet with them and drink and do cocaine or whatever, smoke pot. There was one girl I met who became my best friend. We just used together all the time. And then we actually ended up living together for a while. And we had very similar issues. I had developed like an eating disorder along the way. So I became anorexic and bulimic. And, she struggled with those things too. And she was an alcoholic, as I was. And, when I say alcoholic, I mean, we would wake up and the first thing we would do is take shots. Like, no water, no bathroom breaks. First thing, that bottle of vodka or whatever is right beside the bed, and that's your breakfast, right? No food, because it hits harder if you don't have food, right? She unfortunately passed away just 2 years ago, and she was only 27. She was like my best friend for like 8 years, and I guess we just used together, but she was my best friend. She got to a point where she was just drinking that Kraken every single day with no food for weeks on end. And she started having seizures, and one day she just didn't wake up from one. I'm the age now that she was when she died. She was 2 years older than me. And I just, sometimes I wish so badly that I I had come to Christ earlier. You know, maybe I could have, I don't know. My life was really dark. Yeah. I had nobody. I had no family. I had no friends. All I had was just substances. It was just dark. You know, I just felt so abandoned. You know, with the passing of my mom, and my dad and I had it out one night, and he kicked me out like a year afterwards. So at 16, I was on my own, and I just had no backup, no one to rely on. You know, it was hell. It was stuff and nightmares for sure. And no God, right? I didn't know God. I placed my faith in substances, looking at content online that would fuel my depression. I would look at photos of smaller girls who were even more anorexic. It's just, I know, it doesn't make sense. I would look at pictures of like just ridiculous, depressing stuff. So I was working at a Shoppers Drug Mart, and there was this woman who was so happy all the time. She was a cosmetician. And I really thought, I was like, she is on some strong antidepressants, because this girl is nuts. I was like, she is always smiling, and she's not even on anything, you know? And here I was going on my breaks, literally drinking and smoking weed on my breaks and still functioning. And she would just be like, "Hi, Rebekah. How are you today? Hi, Rebekah." And I'd be like, "This woman is nuts." She used to drive me bonkers, because I was just like a walking cloud of depression, right? One day I go up to her counter, and we're talking, and she says to me, "Do you want to go to church with me tomorrow, Rebekah?" And I was like, No, thank you. Nah. And she was like, "Are you sure? Okay, no problem. And then literally the very next time I worked with her, because I think I worked with her like once a week, she was like, "So do you want to go to church with me tomorrow?" And I was like, "No, I think we had this discussion before, right?" And, you know, she's like, "That's right. You don't want to go to church. Okay, no problem." And then the very next week, she's like, "So Rebekah, do you want to go to church with me tomorrow?" It was like clockwork. She would not let up. And it was like she just forgot my answer every single time. And after like 8 months of that, I used to work Sundays, and finally I had a Sunday off. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to be at home crying and smoking and drinking anyways. So I was like, I may as well go to church. And I was like, fine, I'll go to church with you. So I went to church with her. I remember getting ready in the morning and putting on a dress like when I was in Sunday school, you know, and I was getting all nostalgic, and I was like, okay, this will be fun. It'll be nostalgic, right? That's all I thought it was going to be. I wasn't expecting an encounter with God. I didn't even know that was a thing, right? But man, as soon as I walked through those doors, it was like, whoosh, you know, like his presence just hit me, and he was just everywhere. And I just stopped, and I was like, "It's you." And I was like, "That, like, you're my God. Like, I recognize you. I know you." Right? And it was like he was happy to see me. You know when you get home after a long day and your dog is jumping all over you, they're so excited to see you. It was like that. Not that God's a dog. I'm sorry, God, but I'm sorry to compare you to that. But that was the amount of excitement I felt like from his presence. And I just said, okay, like that was it. And so I sat down in the pews and I was like, well, you know, God, you're here, I'm here. It's been a good 20 years, but hello. And immediately he started talking to me. And it wasn't like a, hi, how are you, or anything. And I knew it was him because I didn't hear this voice beforehand. It wasn't audible. Like I didn't hear it with my physical ears, but I heard it like in my heart and in my spirit. I heard his voice. And he immediately says to me, he says, you know, he's like, great, you're here. He's like, quit your job. I was like, what? Excuse me. And he's like, yeah, quit your job. Yeah. I'm so glad you're here, by the way. I was like, no. And I went, you're crazy. I said, I'm not quitting my job. And he's like, okay, no problem. You're not going to quit your job. I understand. That's a hard thing to ask of you. But within 24 hours, I had gotten into a big argument with my manager over the phone. And I got so mad. And I wasn't thinking clearly. And in the moment, I just said, I quit. And my roommates were sitting there and their jaws just dropped. They were like, you did not just do that. Because I got rent to pay. They can't cover my rent. They were younger than me, actually. And I was just like, all right, I quit my job. You know? Yeah, and I started job hunting day and night, 12 hours a day. And within 5 days, I had gotten a new job. There was a gentleman who worked there who was the only other Christian there. At this point, I had considered myself a Christian, but I didn't know what it meant to be saved. I was still smoking and drinking and all that stuff. But, you know, I recognized that God was in my life. And, you know, I would talk to him and stuff. But I started dating the only other Christian that was there. We only dated for a month, but he brought me to Viva Church. And, you know, walking into Viva Church, God was like, you know, this is where I want you, right? But it's crazy that God provided that job just to get me into church. And he lured me in with a man. Which is hilarious. So at this point, I was fired from that job. I was going to Viva, but I had no job, no money. And I was suddenly struggling to get a job. I suddenly couldn't get a job. And after I broke up with that guy, I, you know, had a breakdown and I went on like a 2-week bender. I was just at a point where I was like, I don't even care anymore. I was like, just put me on the streets. Just, you know, just end it. So that was a really rock bottom for me. And I ran out of money. And instead of looking for a job, I started stealing alcohol from the stores. And it was the one and only time I had stolen alcohol was during that bender, those days. And then one day I woke up, I went to go steal, and God said to me, he was like, hey, you're going to get caught today. And I was like, nah, it's fine. It's a false confidence, right? And he was like, okay, but you're going to get caught and you're going to be fine. You're going to get off with a slap on the wrist, but you're going to get caught. And I said, no, they don't even, I was like, God, they don't even know. They don't even know. And I'm like, drunk, right? So what do I know, right? I walk out and I felt so stupid because I could just feel, I just felt like God was going like, so about that not getting caught, you know? And I was like, okay, God, okay, I got caught. And I had this online friend that she had watched me she had followed my online accounts where I posted like the drinking and the drug use and everything like that. And she's all the way in the UK. And I didn't even know she was Christian. But she messages me one day and she's like, hey, have you ever seen The Chosen? And I was like, no. And she's like, well, it's a show about Jesus. She's like, you're going to church now. So, it's cool. You should try it out. And I was like, okay. So, I was, drinking and started watching it. I was like, why not? There's this scene in the first episode where he redeems Mary Magdalene. And she was an alcoholic and she was about to kill herself and he redeems her. And that hit me really deeply, but that wasn't the scene that did it for me. For some reason, I was watching episode 4. Simon Peter is fishing and he doesn't have a catch all night. And Jesus comes in the morning and he says, let down your net for a catch. And Simon Peter says, Lord, we've been fishing all night and we haven't had a single fish, but at your command, I'll let down my net. And he lets down his net and all these fish come and it almost breaks the boat. Oh, it's great. And Simon Peter jumps out of the boat and he falls to his knees in front of Jesus and he says, Lord, depart from me, for I am a sinful man. And when I saw that, it was like an arrow, suddenly just pierced my chest. Like somebody had just stabbed me in my chest. And it was really painful. I was like, what's going on? So I paused the video. Suddenly I was in so much physical and spiritual pain, head to toe over everything I had done in my life, everything in the last 20 years, all the drinking and all the bad stuff I had done, all the men, everything just hit me. And even more so, the fact that I had stolen, I had done a lot of bad things, but I had never broken a commandment before. And I remembered those from when I was in kindergarten, right? So I was like, oh my gosh, I broke a commandment, right? And it was just conviction, just so powerful. It was 20 years of built up conviction. And I had to lie down. It was too painful. And it felt like it was so much physical pain. It felt like a truck was literally running over my chest, back and forth, back and forth. It was so painful. Obviously, I'm bawling at this point, right? I'm sobbing. I'm in so much pain. And the only things I can get out of my mouth is, God, I'm sorry. 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 And just over and over and over is the only thing I can say. And suddenly I'm crying out to him just on my back. And I'm like, God, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And I just went to bed. I was so exhausted. I just went straight to bed. And then when I woke up the next morning, it was all gone. It was all gone. My addictions, my depression, my PTSD, my eating disorders, my anxiety, literally every single thing was gone overnight. Things I had struggled with my entire life and things I had struggled with for 11 years. I was a severe alcoholic for 11 years. I would do anything for it. And overnight, that desire just gone. And I remember looking at the bottle on the floor and I was just disgusted by it. And I just woke up with so much joy. I was so happy. I was what the heck is going on? When you see, if you guys have ever seen the old black and white Christmas Carol movies, when he wakes up after all the ghosts of Christmas, past, future, present, visit him, and he's so happy. He's like a little kid and he's going around, he's kissing everybody and he's giving out money and giving out turkeys and all this stuff. That's how I felt. That was literally me. I was just I was so full of joy. And I had never felt that before in my life. And it was just all that weight I had been carrying around, all that pain, it was just gone. I literally felt like somebody had hit a reset button on my life. And I felt like I was 5 years old again. That's how free I felt. That's how free of pain I felt. I felt so innocent. I felt like nothing bad had ever happened to me and I had never done anything bad. That's how I felt, and I just felt like I was like just experiencing life for the first time ever. God just said to me, he said, let's start over from where we left off. And, I had no job, I had no money, and I was on the verge of being kicked out. That was like the best morning of my life. And I just said, all right, God, let's go get me a job. I really think of that moment like, man, that was the turnaround. That was the turnaround. And from then on, I just gave everything to him because suddenly nothing else mattered. I had him. There's been a lot of times, my world literally had to be turned upside down because I was down here and God had to get me up here. So a lot of really tough things happened. Moving from place to place, losing some jobs, losing people. What I would do, where if I would make it and then, somebody would help me out or God would provide at the last second, because he loves to wait to the last second. Sorry, God. But at the same time, it's been so much easier because I've got Jesus and, he's got me and he's never going to let anything happen to me again, not like that. And, I just know he's got it. There's been some times where people have been like, wow, you're in a really bad situation right now. But I've been like, oh, I know. Yeah, God is good though. Just everyday things that I used to deal with don't even cross my mind anymore. Attitudes I used to struggle with or behaviors I used to struggle with are just they never even happened. Completely new person, completely reborn. From the outside, doesn't look good. But on the inside, God's just whispering to you. He's like, I've got this. I've got this. Don't you worry about a thing. I've got this. So, before I had the Holy Spirit, I didn't really consider sin, and I didn't really consider obedient to be something I should do. I had just, I was on my own at 16, so I was still a child, but I was forced to be an adult. So I was just always in that mindset, I can do what I want. I'm on my own. You're not taking care of me. I'm taking care of me. I can do what I want. That was my mindset. But now it is such a joy to submit to him. There's just there's no greater pleasure. He takes care of us and he leads us and he loves us. And he literally laid down his life for us. Why wouldn't I want to give everything I have to the one who's done that for me, to the one who leads me like that, the one who loves me like that, and it just brings me so much happiness to be obedient to him. And then I feel him sharing his joy with me. The more I'm obedient to him, the most motivating thing in the world is just his love, and to just think that I'm going to live in this love forever. And it's so beautiful and it's so freeing. We don't even have the capacity to love like that. This is a love that doesn't even make sense to our human brains. He will speak so clearly to me. And when I say so clearly, I mean, he'll go from whispering in my ear to booming in my head. And I'm like, whoa, okay, God, okay. I was looking up at the clouds
last week. It was really recent.
And I just felt so much of God's presence. And I love looking up at the sky. I always look up at the sky, whether it's daytime or nighttime. I love the clouds and the way the sun plays off of the rays, the clouds. And then I love the stars in the sky. And last week I looked up at it and I felt like I could see Jesus standing on one of the clouds. And like he was holding his arms out like this. And there were angels coming and putting on a robe on him, like he was getting ready. And it was so beautiful. And he looked at me and he smiled. And I just thought, like, man, I can't wait to see you face to face. Jesus died on the cross for me because I'm a sinner. I'm an awful sinner. Because I'm his creation. And like any parent, he would literally lay his life down for his creation. He couldn't stand the thought of us being separated from him for eternity. And he said, I would rather die than have that happen. And he did. And it was only temporary. He was raised. Father raised him after 3 days. And now he lives, and he's preparing a place for all of us. And he's eagerly waiting for us to come to him, just as we are eagerly waiting to go to him. But before that happens, we have to grow and we have to do the work that he has prepared for us beforehand to do here. There's nothing that compares. There's no greater joy. There's no greater pleasure. There's no greater love. You know, you can have everything in the world, but without Jesus, you have nothing. Nothing. Because all of this is going to be gone. It's all going to burn up. And even if it were to last for eternity, like for instance, let's say all the money and cars and everything would last for eternity, all the drugs. That's great, but like, this is how much happiness they give you. And then this is how much happiness Jesus gives you, and fulfillment and love. And it's just like, it just doesn't stop. It's like a consistent, like, feeding into your system of just exactly what you need. It's the only thing that's fulfilling is a relationship with Jesus. No career or person is ever going to fulfill you, but Jesus will. Jesus to me is my everything. He's my everything. He's my rock. He's my best friend. He's the love of my life. He's my creator. He's my savior. He's my doctor. He's my counselor. He's my lawyer. He's my protector. He's my father. He's my brother. He's just everything to me. It's everything.